In South Korea, it is very important for young people to do well in school. Parents put a lot of pressure on their children to study hard and get good grades. Students often have to hire tutors after school, and some even return to the school at night to do extra work. This has actually become a big problem in Korea because many students stay up so late at night studying that they fall asleep the next day in class. In recent years, students have actually been banned from studying after 10 p.m. in some areas. One night, a Korean girl named Sun-hee was at school. It was quite late and she was studying in the library with a group of other students from her class. The lights in the library were on, but the rest of the school was in darkness. After a while, Sun-hee needed to go to the bathroom, so she took a break from her studies, telling her friends that she would be back in a moment. The girl walked out of the library and down the darkened hallway to the school washroom. In the library, when a few minutes had passed, the other boys and girls began to notice a faint tapping noise. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the window. Looking around, they saw a pale, not woman standing outside. Her face was pressed up against the window and her eyes were tightly shut. One long crooked finger was tapping on the window. They wondered what the woman was doing outside at this time of night. A moment later, the woman opened her eyes and the students gasped in horror. She didn't have any eyes. There were just deep, dark holes where her eyes should have been. The woman raised her fist and brought it crashing down against the window. The glass shattered. Suddenly, all the lights went out. In the school bathroom, Sun-hee was just about to wash her hands when she was plunged into darkness. Everything was silent. She never heard the screams of terror coming from the library. There was no way she could have known about the pandemonium and slaughter that had just broken out just a few rooms away. She continued washing her hands in the dark, blissfully unaware of the horrific cries that echoed down the hallway. Just as abruptly as they had begun, the yells and screams stopped, and the school was deathly silent once again. Sun-hee opened the bathroom door and strolled back down the hallway. When she went into the library, she stopped in her tracks. The dead bodies of the other students were strewn about the library. Some of the corpses were sprawled on the floor, while others were draped across desks and filing cabinets. She started shaking with fear. Her mind raced as she tried to understand what had happened. It was a massacre. Just then she heard footsteps echoing down the hallway. Sun-hee was a clever girl, and thinking fast, she threw herself on the floor next to the dead bodies of her friends and lay motionless. She listened as something quietly crept into the library. Sun-hee kept her eyes closed and pretended to be dead. She heard a rustling sound as something moved around the room. Fearing the worst, Sun-hee lay as still as she could and tried not to make a sound. She heard a voice whispering, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Curiosity got the better of her and she cautiously opened her eyes ever so slightly and took a peek. In the middle of the room stood a pale, ghostly woman dressed in white. Sun-hee closed her eyes again and fought the urge to scream. She could hear the ghost creeping around the room, going from body to body, muttering under its breath. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The girl held her eyes tightly shut. She hoped and prayed that the ghost would leave soon. 1, 2, 1, 2. The ghostly woman was shuffling from one corpse to the next, getting closer and closer. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. As Sun-hee listened to the chilling voice of the ghost, she tried not to do anything that would attract attention. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The ghost was drawing even nearer. Sun-hee dared not to move. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The ghost was almost beside her. The girl tried not to breathe. Suddenly, the counting stopped. Sun-Hee remained motionless. She strained to hear even the slightest noise. She was afraid to move a muscle. There was no sound. The library was suspiciously quiet. After several minutes of complete silence, Sun-Hee was sure that the ghost was gone. Sun-Hee slowly opened her eyes. The ghost was crouched directly over her, staring into her eyes. One pale, bony finger was pointing straight at Sun-Hee's terrified face. 1, 2, said the ghost as it plucked out her eyeballs. There was an old farmer in Arizona who owned the best farm in the area. Everybody said his crops were the best, and people came from all over to buy their goods from him. Whenever people asked him how he was able to grow such good quality crops, the old farmer would say it was all down to his scarecrow. "That old scarecrow is the one I have to thank," said the farmer. "He makes sure no crops or critters or pests come near my crops." The old farmer had built the scarecrow himself, and it was a fearsome sight. He spent months working on it to make it as scary as possible. He knew how important it was to keep the pests away from his crops. So he gave it enormous straw arms that stretched out about 6 feet, and big long legs that made it as tall as a tree. But the scariest thing about this scarecrow was its head. The farmer carved it himself out of a huge pumpkin. He spent countless days and nights perfecting his design until it was perfect. The scarecrow's face and head were so grotesque and ugly that even he was sometimes scared to look at it. But it was very effective, scaring away every rodent and bird that ventured near. The neighboring farm was owned by 2 young men who were brothers named Josh and Harold. They were lazy and never did much work around the farm, which resulted in their crops being bad. They were jealous of the old farmer's success and were plotting against him. If they could drive him out of business, they could take over his farm and make more money. So, one night, the brothers decided to sneak onto the old farmer's land. They stole his prize scarecrow and brought it back to their own house, where they stuffed it in an old closet so nobody would ever find it. The next day, the farmer woke up to find his hideous scarecrow missing, and all his crops being eaten by rats and crows. He fell to his knees and cried, knowing that his farm would soon be out of business. Meanwhile, the brothers Josh and Harold were watching from their own property and couldn't help but laugh out loud when they saw the old man's tears of grief. Hearing the laughter, the old farmer came over and asked them if they knew what happened to his scarecrow. The brothers looked him right in the eye and said they had no idea where his precious scarecrow might be. "But you know, I'll go out of business and have to sell my farm if I can't find my scarecrow," said the farmer. Josh just laughed in his face, saying, "That's just your tough luck, isn't it?" "Sucks to be you," giggled Harold. The old farmer walked slowly back to his house, his head hanging down in defeat and depression. That night, as Josh and Harold had trouble sleeping, not because they felt any remorse, but because they couldn't get the image of the scarecrow's horrible, twisted face out of their minds. They decided they would never be able to sleep as long as that ugly pumpkin head was in their house. So they got up and dragged the scarecrow out of the closet. Harold took a baseball bat and smashed the scarecrow's head to pieces until all that was left was little bits of pumpkin strewn across the floor. The brothers swept up the pumpkin head pieces and threw them in the trash. Then they went back to bed and were soon fast asleep, having put all their thoughts of that disgusting scarecrow face out of their heads. Sometime after midnight, Josh and Harold were awoken by the sounds of scratching and clawing at their bedroom door. "Did you forget to put the dog out?" asked Harold sleepily. We don't have a dog," stammered Josh. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open and a solitary long straw arm snaked in through the opening. Then a second arm thrashed around, followed by two long stick legs. The two brothers were frozen in fear and could only look with horror as the headless Scarecrow's body rose up on its long stick legs and its long arms reached out for them in the darkness. Harold felt a cold straw claw close around his ankle and screamed as loud as he could. He begged his brother Josh to help him, but Josh was already running out of the bedroom. Fleeing in terror, he ran down the hallway, crashed through the front door, and out onto the moonlit road. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, puffing and panting and screaming at the top of his voice. As he passed his neighbor's house, he saw the old farmer standing at his gate. In the moonlight, he could see the farmer just staring at him with a strange smile on his face. Josh kept running, his bare feet slapping against the rough gravel road. He glanced back over his shoulder and saw something that scared him to his very soul. He saw the Scarecrow running along the road close behind him. It was gaining on him, coming closer and closer. And that wasn't all he saw. He noticed the Scarecrow had a brand new head, and it looked a lot like Harold. I was awoken by a loud thumping sound. Startled, I sat up in my bed, but I could see nothing in the darkness of my room. No odd shapes. Thinking it was my imagination, I went back to sleep. But a few minutes later, the low thumping happened again. I opened my eyes and glanced at the clock next to my nightstand, and it read midnight. Midnight, the witching hour. I snorted at the silly saying. I didn't believe in such nonsense. I believed the thumping was probably an animal on the roof. All sorts of night animals tend to get up there, especially at this hour. The sound had to be coming from above, and just sounds like it's in my room. I was about to close my eyes again, but suddenly the thumping happened again, louder. Okay, so now I'm a little creeped out. I never heard something so loud before. I shut my eyes tight and tried to fall back asleep. I wish my parents were home, but they left earlier to visit my sick grandmother, and my older brother is spending the night with his girlfriend. I almost wished Ashley was here. She's this annoying airhead from my school. Can't stand her snobby attitude, and it sucked that she lived right next door. At the moment, though, I started wishing even she was here with me. Thump. Oh God. I pulled the covers over my head and tried to ignore the sound. It had to be my imagination. Yep, just imagining it. I shouldn't have read so many creepypasta stories before falling asleep. Creepy stories from this site always give me nightmares. An hour passed. No more thumping. Good. Starting to feel sleepy again. As I start to doze off, I hear the whisper, I have come for you. My eyes shot open. I will feast on your soft flesh. I started to cry. That voice was real. There was something in the room with me. I will enjoy the sound of your screams while I slowly peel off your skin. I didn't want to look, but I felt like I had to. My eyes tried to locate the smooth, deep voice, the voice that was threatening horrid things. I quickly spotted it. He was at the foot of my bed. Even in the darkness, I could see how tall he was, and very pale. His large black eyes glared down at me with such intense hatred. Why was he angry at me? I don't understand, but did I even want to? Tonight, Ashley, you will die, he whispered angrily. I was about to scream, but then I realized something. Did he just say Ashley? I'm not Ashley, I managed to shout at the pale man. You're not? Asked the pale man with a puzzled expression. No, my name's Erica. Ashley lives in the house next door, I explained nervously. The pale man stared at me for a moment, and then he pulled out a piece of paper from a pocket and studied it. With a look of annoyance, he stuffed the paper back in his pocket and smiled at me. Oh God, his smile. His mouth was too wide, and his teeth were sharp, maybe even razor sharp. My deepest apologies. I was given the wrong information. Sorry to have disturbed your rest, he said politely, and then I watched stunned as he crawled out of my bedroom window. Oh, he popped his head back inside and grinned at me with a large, scary grin. I know this is rather strange, coming from me, but would you like to maybe catch a movie one of these days, or dinner, perhaps? Well, I'm kind of already seeing someone, I said. Oh, pity. Well, have a good night, he said as he poked back out. I stood frozen for a bit. I couldn't believe what just happened. Nobody would believe me. Well, it was gone now, whatever hell he was. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I was brave enough to finally move and went to close my window and lock it securely. As I settled into sleep, I realized something. It was going to get Airhead Ashley. I was about to dart out of bed, but stopped. She was pretty nasty to everybody. Not like she was somebody I cared for, too. Oh well, I thought as I snuggled back into my warm blankets and went back to sleep. There's all kinds of shocking videos on the internet, showing people doing sick, disgusting, and horrific things. For some reason, people watch the videos and then post their reaction on YouTube. Perhaps you've heard of some of these shock videos. They usually have weird titles like 3 guys, 1 crowbar, 2 girls, 1 poop, and 1 man, 1 cactus. I've watched every one of them, but today I watched one video that is more disturbing than all the rest put together. The title of the video was 1 Guy, 2 Spoons. You're probably already wondering what it's about, but let me assure you, it's far more disgusting than anything you can think of. It shows a man using 2 spoons to pop out his eyeballs. Yep, that's right. He actually digs behind his own eyeballs and pops them out of his head using the spoons. When I watched the video, I was so disturbed by it, I almost threw up. As sickening as the video was, I forced myself to watch it to the end. I wish I hadn't. Here's a good piece of advice for you. Be careful what you watch, because that what you see can never be unseen. When the video was over, I heard my mom calling me from downstairs, telling me that dinner was ready. I raced down and took a seat at the kitchen table. My father was reading the newspaper, and my mom was setting the table. That's odd, my father remarked. This article claims there's a new viral video going around on the internet. They say that it's dangerous. Apparently it causes anyone who sees it to go insane and try and pop out their own eyeballs. My father broke off and looked up. Oh my God, my mother screamed. Oh my God, what have you done? But it was already too late. I could feel the spoons in my hands, but I couldn't see a thing. There it goes again. Something definitely moved this time. It was very brief. But out of the corner of your eye, you saw something. But wait. All the doors are locked, no pets, and your parents won't get home until around 10. So there's no way something moved. It's just your imagination getting the best of you. Sitting alone in your room, the only light emitting from the monitor of your computer. You stare into the darkness for several minutes, just to be sure. Now you feel silly. What were you thinking? Of course there's nothing there. What are you, 6? Go back to what you were doing. 15 minutes later, as you prepare to go to bed, you're in the bathroom. The shower curtain shifts. Wait, no. Stop spooking yourself. It's just an overactive imagination filling your head with what isn't really there. You gaze into the mirror at yourself. You say it to yourself, slowly and clearly. Imagination. With a sigh, you turn the lights off and head towards your room. Laying in bed, you stare at your ceiling, dark and foreboding. Only the motion of a small fan disturbing the calmness of the night. A shadow from the light in the hall shifts. No, no, stop it. It's your imagination, just that. Go to sleep, you fool. But then, just when you're about to drift off to sleep, at that phase no one remembers when they wake, you sense something in the darkness. It's your imagination leering down at you with a jagged, macabre smile. The sweet old lady rocks rhythmically in her recliner. Her head nods often in approval as she agrees wholeheartedly with her favorite evangelist late this evening. This has been Mrs. Weatherford's routine every night since her late husband left her alone and vulnerable. The preacher is hitting his groove on this exciting paid advertisement. The love of God is unyielding. His grace is amazing because it is neither earned nor taken, nor it is free. All he requires is that you receive his gift. All Christ wants from you is to understand that you are no longer condemned, and to go forth and make the world a better place through love and compassion, through the word of the Lord. The sweet old lady increases her rocking pace in childlike excitement as the words of the Lord ring true in her heart. As she turns and gestures to the young Girl Scout tied to the dining room chair, she can sense the Holy Spirit's message getting through by the tears of joy streaming down the saved child's cheeks.